Chapter 18, Subdivisions and Developments. In this chapter, we're going to learn about the various methods of developing and subdividing land, some of the lingo they use. We're going to identify the impacts of environmental regulations and other laws on sales, health, and safety of building regulations. Uh, and we'll kick it off with this, assemblage. All right, so what is assemblage? When you combine two or more smaller lots together to make a larger lot, that is known as assemblage. Um, and the increase in value is known as plottage value. Uh, the subdivider buys undeveloped acreage, and then they divide it into smaller lots for sale to individuals or developers who is not necessarily the subdivider. Sometimes developers buy land that's already ready to build on from subdividers, but sometimes the developers are the subdivider themselves or for the subdivider's own use. The developer builds homes or other buildings on the lots and then they sell them. So that's basically how it works. Now, in New Jersey, when a second lot is sold off of a larger parcel, the development is classified as a subdivision. The state of New Jersey allows municipalities to decide what constitutes a minor subdivision that doesn't require a public hearing and what constitutes a major subdivision that does. They leave it up to each municipality. So minor subdivisions, one or two, three, four, five lots. Well, it depends on your municipality what they classify as a minor subdivision or major subdivision. So major subdivisions require public hearings. So if you went to your public town hall meetings, you'd learn about that. You'd hear them talking about it. Major subdivisions require public hearings to get the approval. They have a lot more issues that they need to address, and they must be given. They must give the public an opportunity to comment on them, to ask questions and concerns. How is this going to affect the demands on our schools that are already overcrowded? How is this going to affect traffic? Are we going to put in a light there? Are they going to are they going to be putting in new sewer lines? Because the other ones are already too small. We need larger water supply, and how are we going to handle all these things? Are we going to get any additional police or fire trucks or anything to handle? If you're depending on the size of the subdivision, it may affect it. Or what about schools and such? So examples of some issues of larger subdivisions are the roads, traffic, the burden on local school districts, public work services, emergency services like police, fire, waste removal, water and sewer and drainage and environmental impacts as well are all issues that must be addressed when getting the approvals for that major subdivision. Now, land planning precedes the actual subdividing process, which must comply with the municipality's master plan. Every municipality has a master plan on how they're going to run their community. For all kinds of things, from natural disasters to wartime to peacetime, how to deal with local crime. What about fire and safety? And what about medical, the hospitals and ambulance services? What about the roads and the plowing and the garbage pickup and the sewage disposal and the fresh water supplies? And all this stuff is covered in the master plan. Every community has to have a master plan that discusses the management of all of these things. So planning boards and planning commissioners will work closely with these developers and subdividers. Dedication is when they give land to the government for public use, like streets, schools, and parks. They're going to need assurance by bonding. You purchase bonds, the cities purchase bonds that make sure that the sewer and street costs will be paid. Well, in this case, it's not going to be the city purchasing the bonds, it's going to be the builder to make sure that they have those finances in place. There has to be compliance with local zoning ordinances governing the use and lot sizes, fire and safety ordinances, building and construction codes, make sure that they're all compliant. And before any construction can begin, you may need to get the builder may need to get a perk test. It's a percolation test, or known as a perk test for short. It tests how well soil absorbs liquids for drainage and runoff and for septic systems. It's important to see because if you have if the soil is heavy in clay content, when water hits it, it's just going to sit there. It's going to take a long time to get into the ground, right? But if it's not, if it has a low clay content, the ground could absorb the water at quicker rates. But the thing is, if it doesn't, you may have issues. Here, I got a video coming up about it that'll explain that from This Old House. You guys remember that show? All right, so let's highlight dedication of land for streets, schools, or parks. That is giving land to the government. Giving land to the government. Page 340. Then down the bottom here, you have percolation tests. It's a test of the soil's ability to absorb liquids for drainage and runoff, and if they're going to have a septic system installed, because otherwise they may not be able to put in a septic system. Then you'll have to have can you even build there if there's no city services that you could tie into? Depending on how far you are from them, that may not be a possibility. So you may not even be able to build on the land if the soil can't absorb the liquids well enough in the area. You may not even be able to put it in there. So frequently the developer has to get an environmental impact report done, which covers some of these things. Right? You guys got these notes?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. So here's a video from This Old House. They put together this is how they do an actual percolation or perk test. Here, let me optimize this video for sharing and play it.
One of the first things to consider when building a house like this out in the country is a septic plan. What to do with the waste and water that needs to leave that building. Now it needs to go into a septic system. There's a couple of key components to a septic system. One is a septic tank. Now this tank will accept waste and water. Now the solids will stay in the tank and be broken down over time by bacteria. But the water that'll pass through the tank will now go out through a leach field. Now a leach field is a series of pipes, perforated pipes, that sit below the substrate of the soil, and the water will trickle or drip down through the ground. Now to determine if you can even have a septic system, it starts with a perk test. Brendan Zabrickis with the town of Essex, you've had your share of perk tests, right?
I sure have.
So what's a perk test?
Well, that stands for a percolation test, and it's a field test to simulate how wastewater will travel down through the soil once a septic system is built on top of it.
How fast it'll pass through, sort of like water going down through the coffee grounds in a filter.
That's a good analogy, yes.
Right. Okay. So what have you done to get us to this point?
Well, previous to this, we dug several deep holes, about 10 feet down into the ground.
Okay.
That allowed us to get a look at the various soil layers that you're going to find whenever you dig here in New England.
All right, so this is topsoil. What are you seeing? What am I seeing?
Well, as you just mentioned, this is your topsoil. Then you go through a layer known as subsoil. You then finally get down to a layer that is really the glacial material. In other words, the glacier brought it in.
Yeah.
We have determined that this is the most restrictive or most limiting layer in the soil profile, and the septic system code requires that we actually perform the perk test in that most limiting
So
layer.
you're testing at almost the worst place.
The worst place that you're going to have underneath that system. That's
All right.
correct.
So that looks pretty dense right here, so not
That's
accept
right.
water too well.
That's exactly right. So what we did after that is, knowing what we had in the deep holes, we just had the machine dig down a shelf to the top of that most restrictive layer,
right.
and we're ready to dig a perk hole that's about 12 inches in diameter and about 18 inches deep.
Okay.
Then we're going to fill that hole with water and let the hole sit for a little while to make it saturated. That will be a great simulation of how soil will behave when it's wet underneath a leach facility. Then we will use a ruler to watch the rate at which the water drops down through the hole over time.
Yeah.
And that will give us what's called a perk rate, or percolation
So what
rate.
happens if the rate doesn't drop fast enough?
If it doesn't drop fast enough, that would be a limitation to the site, that you may not be able to build a septic system in this
This
particular
is a pretty
location.
important test then.
It is very important. So now I'm just going to take this water, pour it into the hole against a board that I've already got set up.
What's the board do?
What this does is it puts the water into the hole more gently so that we do not stir up the fine material in there.
Yeah.
And we want to bring this water level up to about 12 inches, and we're going to maintain that level for about 15 minutes, again, to simulate saturated conditions in the soil.
Okay. Okay.
So we'll check that. We're about 9 so far, so we're going to need another bucket of water, Richard.
All right, Brennan, it has been 15 minutes.
We want to see the time it takes to go from 9 inches down to 6 inches. Well, it dropped down to 6 inches in about 27 minutes.
So is that good?
Yeah, I've seen quicker than that, but it's somewhere right in the middle.
But you're telling us that we passed the test, right?
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you for your help on the perk test.
Of course.
Thanks for watching. This Old House has got a video for just about every.
I think it would be more scientific than that, huh? But that's the basic test on that they call a perk test, to see how well that the water, how well the earth accepts that water and the drain level. All right, now subdividing. In subdividing, the subdivider seeks out raw land. Okay, the subdivider seeks out raw land that they could profitably subdivide. They determine if the proposed use is consistent with the local zoning laws and regulations. They locate financial backers, and then they initiate marketing strategies. Title to individual parcels are transferred as the lots are being sold off, using what's known as a blanket mortgage, which has a partial release clause in it. Remember that? The partial release clause that allows you to sell off smaller lots off of a larger one without having to repay the whole loan at once. It's kind of like a modified alienation clause. Then we have impact fees. These are fees paid to the municipality by a developer to help the community cope with added demand and use of services. Like the police, fire, schools, garbage, public works, water, sewage demands, etc. Now, I'm learning that there's other methods that municipalities are starting to use now. Instead of charging impact fees to developers to get the projects off the ground, there's these state and government programs that they're using to not put that impact fee on the developer. But I guess it really depends on how good you got it in with the mayor of the town, right? I usually refer to these impact fees as legal bribes, because without them, you're not going to get your project approved. You need to negotiate with them, and they need to be paid to the municipalities to get approvals. So some of the newer methods, they just don't charge the impact fees. Instead, they give these huge tax breaks to the developers, and the city gets reimbursed through state programs of some sort. Now, the municipality can ask for a fire truck to be donated, or a few police cars, or they could even ask, depending on the size of the project, for them to build a new school, or or they could ask for a percentage from each a unit sale price. Like 1% of the sale price of each unit to be paid to the municipality. And then they could decide how they want to use that money. Those are impact fees. What is the purpose of impact fees? To help the community cope with the added demand and use of city services. Okay, that's what impact fees are. Add that to your list of definitions. We could highlight it right here on page 341. So you should write this note under there: using a blanket mortgage with a partial release clause. I should probably type it up so in case there's some people that have trouble reading my handwriting, perhaps. I do not know. So let me grab that. Where is this? Another down here. Using a blanket mortgage with partial release clause. Oh, that doesn't make sense. And impact fees intended to help a community cope with the increased demand for schools and other services. Most subdivisions are laid out using lot and block numbers. An area of land is designated as a block, and areas making up this block are divided into lots. I'm not sure, I may have showed you tax maps before with lots and blocks. Let me know when you guys have these notes in the highlights.
I got them.
Okay, is everybody good?
Sorry, 1 second.
Sure.
Got it. Thanks.
So a blanket mortgage is a loan secured by more than one parcel used to finance subdivision developments. Has that partial release clause that allows the seller to sell off smaller lots off of a larger one, only paying back a portion of the loan as the smaller lots are sold off of the larger one. So it has a modified alienation clause of sorts, the due on sale clause, which doesn't require the entire debt to be repaid in full, only a part of it as the smaller lots are sold off of the larger property. Here's that example of that picture there, of that blanket mortgage. So you use the mortgage to buy the whole property, and then it's divided into 6 different lots here. As you sell one smaller lot off of the larger lot, only a portion of it needs to be paid back. And as you sell off another lot, then another portion needs to be paid back, and so on and so forth. Here's a tax map example right here. So you can see these large numbers in boxes. Sometimes they're in circles. Those dark numbers. Those are block numbers. And each block, every block in a city is numbered. It's laid out in a map. Each block has an individual number. And then each lot is consecutively numbered. Like on this particular block, 336, it has 35 lots on it. So potentially 35 houses. Not necessarily, but potentially. So look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, all the way around the block, it comes all the way back. So there's potentially 35 properties there. We'll call them lots. And they can locate them by lot and block number throughout the city. That's a tax map. Here's a tax map zoomed in a little bit. So here's one, block 355, lot 5. The block number is 335 right here. And here's lot number 5. See how the numbers go all the way around? You can see there's 24 lots on this block. Further, they could divide it into street patterns. The developer needs to decide what kind of street patterns are they going to use. Are they going to use the classic gridiron block pattern? Looks like ice trays there. Or are they going to use a curvilinear style with cul-de-sac streets, perhaps? You know, that's just a different style of layout. And how are they going to lay out the land itself? Each lot. They've got the conventional gardens estate style or the clustered estate style. In both of these examples, you have approximately the same amount of housing. However, the lot sizes are massively different because the clustered estates, they cluster them, they're smaller lot sizes, they cluster them closer together to leave more open space and parkland. See, this one has 23.5 acres of parkland. This one has 1.5 acres of parkland. But people's individual houses, your backyards, are a lot smaller. Here's another type of smaller subdivision that only has 8 houses on it. Okay, so here you got the street out here, and then you got, so this in black, this is the layout of the land. This is your property, right? This is just one block. This is one lot right here. Now you could subdivide it into, what they're doing here is they're subdividing it into 8 different smaller lots. And they put a cul-de-sac street on there. They're going to build 8 different houses. You see each house is individually numbered here. This is known as a plat map. A plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location and sizes of the individual lots. You see how there's, this one's 50 by 80, 70 by 100. You know, they got different lot sizes here. So a plat is a map of a subdivision indicating the location and boundaries of each individual property. It's also considered a legal description of land here in New Jersey. Well, most places. So, highlight a plat. What is a plat? It's a map. It's a map of a subdivision indicating the location of each of the individual properties and their boundary lines and sizes and such. It's basically laid out on a map. So this is a plat map. You get that? Bottom page is 342. Okay. And then we have land planning, subdivision plans. Okay, so Covenants and condition and restrictions. Not the first time we heard of those. What is a covenant? It's a legal promise. It's usually a restrictive legal promise. Who can place restrictions in deeds? Only private parties. Governments have their own powers on how they could regulate how you use your land. So these restrictions are placed in deeds by private parties, not by government. These restrictions are called restrictive covenants. They're placed in deeds by the owner, subdivider, or private parties, not by the government, which has its own government powers. You could see back to chapter 9, 146, where we went over government powers. Now, estates and land based on restrictions are called fee determinable, defeasible fee, or conditional fee estates. We went over those in chapter 6 back on page 104. A moratorium, this is stuff we're going to see in the coming page here. A moratorium is a halt to development in the area. So it's a stopping of any development in the area. It's important for a developer to record their permits and approvals as they get them for their subdivision in the public records, so that in the event of a moratorium being called, they could still continue their project if they recorded all of their approvals. If they didn't, then they can't. That's important. The FHA has a minimum standard for new construction materials and occupancy, which must be a majority of the owner occupants in the complex if they're to get FHA approval. And the buyers want to get an FHA loan. Development costs are estimated for any subdivision. Development costs are estimated to be 4 to 6 times the cost of the actual raw land that they bought to do the development on, to build the development on. Density zoning, that's zoning that restricts the maximum number of homes that can be built per acre. So it's zoning for the most homes that can be built per acre. So let's do some highlights now of that stuff that we saw in that previous slide. Dedicated or dedication is turning over land to the government for greater public use, such as schools, parks, and streets. Let me know when you got all the notes.
Done.
All right, everybody else got that?
Yeah.
All right, so okay, so we went over all this stuff on that previous slide. All right, now okay, now continuing with this stuff too. Here's a little factoid, not on the exams though. An analysis of the development cost substantiates the sales price for the typical building lot of 4 to 6 times the cost of the raw land. You don't need to highlight that. I originally highlighted that just to point it out to you guys. So it's put here as a factoid. Don't highlight it. It's not on exams. It's just a factoid for you to learn about. But down here, density zoning. What is density zoning? These are ordinances that restrict the average maximum number of houses that can be built per acre. Another way of saying that sounds different, but it means the same thing, is zoning for building the most homes possible per acre. So it restricts the average maximum number of houses to be built per acre, or zoning for the most homes that can be built per acre. That's two different ways of saying the same thing. It's density zoning. All right. Now, problems in the past use of land, with the past use of land, were things like the soil was contaminated. And they would allow builders to build on old garbage dump sites to build new construction, new homes on top of these old sites. And there may be contaminated land. So to prevent that from being happening anymore, they require that an EIS, an environmental impact study, be done before any new construction project can be done. Now, this is to make sure that you're not building on any old contaminated waste sites, but also to test to make sure that it's not how it's going to impact this development, how it's going to impact the environment of maybe a rare species of bug or animal or something, like if you have plans to do a development, or you got this construction site that you're planning on doing this big development in, and then an owl flies into a tree on your property and decides that they're going to now make a nest and have eggs, and lay there, have their babies there. And this happens to be the rare spotted owl, an endangered species. Guess what? Your project ain't getting off the ground. You're not going to be able to build it. Same thing if they find human remains buried there when they start doing the earthworks on the property. Oh boy, what do they need to do? Call the cops. You need to find out if there was, is this a crime scene? Or is it a historical site? Hey, New Jersey's an old state, third state in the nation, right? Maybe this was a site of historical significance where maybe a battle was fought, when we were fighting against Britain for our independence, our freedom. Or maybe it was a battle that occurred during the Civil War time, we don't know. So you need to get first of all, you got to call the police, get a crime scene investigator down, see are these new bones or old bones, right? Either way, it's going to delay your construction project. That's all we need to know. And if it's old bones, okay, well, now we need to get the Historic Society in here to do their investigation. It's definitely going to have it's going to play a role on the delay of this project. So the EIS study does not just test for contaminated soil. It also tests to see how it affects how this project would affect the environment around it as well. The human remains and stuff, that's just another thing. It's not part of the EIS study. It's just if you happen to come across human remains, these types of things would also affect your project here. Now, one famous example of this is, were you guys ever hear of that ship that was found under the World Trade Centers? You know, after the trade centers were taken down in the terrorist attack, and they were then, they cleaned it up. They were cleaning up the old parts, and there was underneath the trade centers for stories down, they had parking lots. Okay, but did you know that underneath those parking lots, they found a ship? They found an old pirate ship. Well, it wasn't a pirate ship, but they did find an old ship that was buried under the towers. Interesting little factoid. Have you guys ever heard of that? It actually delayed the construction project of the Freedom Tower. Here. I added it into our feed here so you could see it for yourself. And then you could do some looking up if you want to get more information on this. I also have a bunch of videos on it from, this is from AP, Associated Press, but I got videos there from, the Discovery Channel, the History Channel. There's follow-ups on what they found at these archaeologists, what they found at these sites. They carbon dated the wood, and they found that it came from the same area where the Liberty Bell, where the wood that was used to make the Liberty Bell stanchion was from. They carbon dated the trees and were able to track that down. They found money and jewelry and pottery and stuff like that. Dishes and things of that nature that were on that ship that was sunken here. Check this out.
Yeah, well, it's a pretty significant find. It's the kind of thing that archaeologists are always hoping to find in landfill deposits. It's a ship. It was probably put here around in the early 1800s. We know that this area, this whole block, was filled in between about 1790s and the 1830s. So we figure the ship probably predates that and was used as part of the landfilling process. So they filled the ship with dirt and rocks, and in conjunction with timber cribbing features or landfill retaining structures on either side, sunk them to the bottom of the river and used it to create new land along the waterfront.
Did you hear what she said? So basically, a lot of New York is like that. If you were to look at historical maps of New York City, you'd actually see it had a lot slim. First of all, New York City is a peninsula, right? And it's surrounded by water on three sides. And if you look at some historic maps of it, it was very narrow, very narrow. So over time, they built up that shoreline by doing things like this. They would take a ship that was no longer needed, they would sink it to the bottom, they would fill it with dirt and rocks, and build it up to make new land. So just imagine, you guys know where the Twin Towers were, right? How far away that actually was from the water? That used to be the water line, because the ships were there that they sunk in the water. And then they built all those blocks out to the water, were all built up over the ages. Wow, just think about that. Man-made land. That's what it is.
At this point, we really don't know much. So we kind of just have to continue our analysis, see what we're what's under the boat, what's in the dirt around it, and see if that can tell us anything. We're assuming it was placed here in the early 1800s based on historic maps and how they show us how the shoreline progressed. Basically, they would just sink it little by little and gradually extend the shoreline, and usually build new wharves and piers out into the river, leaving a slip in between so boats could continue to sail in and out. And then as waterfront land became more and more valuable and more necessary, they would continue filling in and extending the shoreline gradually. And it's tied into commerce and trade of the early 19th century. There have been ships found in the city before. There was a famous one on Water Street found in the early 1980s. And it's the kind of thing that everyone always hopes to find. It's an exciting find. It's a big find. It's something that's interesting. We can get a lot of information about it. It's a very unique part of history that, we wouldn't have access to otherwise.
Well, one thing you noticed here is those construction workers all standing around, right? Because that construction project stopped in that area of the construction because you can't work there until the Historic Society does their work and then clears it out. So once they find something of historical significance like this, the law requires them to stop all construction, notify the Historic Society. Now, if they found a body down there, well, they would have to notify the police. If that was an old body, then police would notify the Historic Society, and then the Historic Society has to come down, do their investigations, and pull out any kinds of remains and remove that stuff. So it took a little while. This put a delay on that project. Any of you guys ever hear of this one before? Isn't that pretty interesting? Not interested at all. Got it. Okay.
Interested.
Environmental issues. Page 344. The federal agencies are required to do those environmental impact studies that we just spoke about and we had on the previous slide. Here's now where you can highlight it. This is towards the bottom of the page. Environmental issues. Okay.
Got it.
Right. All right. Before any construction can take place, environmentally sensitive areas, you have to have the permission of the NJDEP, that's the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. They need to, you need to get permission not only from the local building department, but you may need to get permission from the state agencies that monitors the environment, because they're given permission to regulate any construction in the wetlands, the highlands, the pinelands, the coastal areas, and the waterfront areas. Under the Wetlands Protection Act, they got the authority to regulate construction in the wetlands. In the highlands, it's the Highlands Water Protection Act. The Pinelands, the Pinelands Protection Act. You see the theme here? It's not like you really need to study what law gives the DEP the authority to regulate construction in these areas. Well, because they're usually named after the areas themselves that they protect. All right, so there's a guide here for builders called BYBOB. That stands for Before You Buy, Before You Build. So there's a guide here from the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection for any builders before they do any construction to consult to see if they also need to get permission from the DEP as well as the local building authority before they could do any construction, because they would regulate the land use in these areas. So the DEP is given the authority to regulate the state's highlands with the Highlands Water Protection Planning Act. The Pinelands, it regulates 22% of the state's land, known as the Pinelands Reserve or Pine Barrens. The Wetlands Act, that requires a permit to excavate, fill, build in certain areas, covers both coastal areas as well as inland freshwater areas where there's fresh water. And listen, a lot of these authorities were also granted to them through the EPA. The EPA is the Environmental Protection Agency. That's a federal agency. And under President Obama, he gave the EPA broad sweeping powers that they never previously had. It caused a lot of problems, to just like mindlessly grant all kinds of additional authorities to some environmental agency under the guise of environmental protection, because the power goes straight to the heads of some of these people. Some of the things that they did was they gave them areas. If it rains and enough water collects in an area, guess what? The EPA can now regulate that area if the puddle is big enough. And they've tried to enforce this too on people's private land. Like you have a farmer that may have some ruts in their dirt roads and stuff, and when it rains, they get some water on it. Now all of a sudden the EPA says, well, that's a wetland that we can regulate. You can't build structures too close to it. You can't have machinery going too close to it. And all of a sudden they start, putting all kinds of restrictions, fines, and penalties on them. And they've done it. It's not just a conspiracy theory. I've got many videos I could show on that, but I'm not. If you want, I can, but I'm not going to do it right now. I could share those with you later. They went after a farmer who built or a private landowner who owned a lot of land. They built a pond and the stock that would fish, so the guy could do fishing on his own. And he spent a lot of money on this, And then the EPA comes in and starts fining him over $30,000 a day for what is probably done neater and cleaner than if it was untouched and natural in nature in those areas, or something that the government would have done. And he actually fought it all the way to the Supreme Court and won. And the EPA had to pay him back and agree not to. They had to pay his legal fees. They had to agree not to harass him anymore. A lot of these laws and rules that Obama gave the EPA, they're still out there, but they're being overturned slowly as it works its way through the court systems. This is why you got to be careful about just giving new agencies all kinds of unrestricted powers, which they tend to do. What did he do? He created the CFPB. He granted all these additional powers to the EPA. During that, I was teaching a class and a broker's class, and when that happened, and one of my broker's students said, "Vic, what do? I got this client of mine. He's a builder. He's got this subdivision he's doing. He's calling me. He's talking about, killing himself because he don't know what to do. He's like, all the land that he had that he was going to build on, he got all the permits for it. Now he can't build on it because the EPA was given some kind of regulations. And now they put a halt to all development in the area, and now he can't even build on the project site right now. And when they do allow it to rebuild, he's not going to be able to use half the property because of some environmental regulation they put in place now." So you see why it's important to make sure that you have, when you get all your building approvals, that you register them. Because if you don't, you could have negative issues like this. And here we had a problem. We had a developer contacting the realtor about asking advice. What do I do? The guy's talking about killing himself because he doesn't know what to do. He's losing all this money, and he borrowed money from people you don't want to owe money to. And I was like, I don't want to get involved in that. So you got the Coastal Area Review Act, the Waterfront Development Act, CAFRA. This all gives the DEP, that's New Jersey's environmental agency, the authority to regulate the construction in these areas. We also have the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. These rules are intended to protect the public from unscrupulous developers and marketers from undue sales pressure, like with timeshare sales. Buyers would have 7 calendar days to cancel the contract for the purchase or lease of these lands. Advertisements for new construction of out-of-state properties marketed in New Jersey and large in-state subdivisions with 100 lots or more, or those with common area elements that have at least 10 units, stipulate that all contracts and disclosures must be available in the same language that the property was advertised in. So if you're ever advertising a property, out-of-state property marketed in New Jersey, or a large in-state subdivision in New Jersey, anything that has common area elements, new construction only this applies to, really. If you're advertising a property in a language other than English, all the contracts and disclosures must be available in the same language that you're advertising the property in. And you cannot be the one that translates it. It has to be done professionally. You have to have them professionally transcripted by a multilingual legal expert who's familiar with terminology used in law, because there are some words in the common English language that have a separate legalese meaning to them, you know? So we got to make sure that they translate properly. This language requirement applies to all properties advertised in New Jersey, not just the new ones, but also from both in and out of state. So any property, new construction, resale properties, any property advertised in New Jersey in a language other than English has to be, you have to have all the contracts and disclosures available in the language that you advertise the property in. Now, if you're just advertising yourself and your real estate services, your general real estate services, that doesn't apply. It's when we're talking about a specific property that you're advertising for sale. Okay? There's often a question on exam about that. If you advertise a property in a language other than English, all the contracts and disclosures must be available in the same language. So let's do some highlights for this stuff. This is from page 345. This is the bottom of page 345. Let me see if I got the exact ones here. That's slightly different wording. Okay, so let me change the exact, let me swap it out with the exact wording one. Let's see, what slide are we on? Oh, that is the same. But that's not the exact one from the book. Close enough. I'll worry about that later, updating this slide. You guys just get those highlights there.
Victor, does it say anything that we need on the bottom, that part that's cut off?
No, you just do the highlights of that sentence right there. Just that one sentence you need to highlight.
You see what I'm talking about, right? Where you wrote some notes?
Oh, why is that cut off for you?
Yeah. Do we need that?
Yeah, it says applies to new construction only.
Hmm.
Hello?
Yeah, yeah, I can't see what it says at all, but are you saying you see it? The note at the bottom next to advertisement?
Hold on a second. I'm asking others in the class here. Can
Oh,
anybody else see that? Trying to get an answer out of these people. It's like pulling teeth. Can anybody else see the bottom of the slide there? Where I have it written applies to new construction only? Want to see if that's
I see it.
Yes.
okay, so you
No.
you may not have yours at full screen then to be able to view the whole
I'm
thing.
I'm
I
at
can
full
also, I cannot see.
Okay. So in the screen part where you're seeing the zoom window, you could expand the zoom window so that you could see more of the screen all the way down to the bottom. You should be able to read this because the bottom of your slide is getting cut off.
Hmm. Yeah, I'm fully expanded, but it's okay. What did you say? It says applies to what?
It applies to new construction only.
To new construction.
Where's yours getting cut off? At what point? What's the last line you could see?
You can
So I
see
see
advertisement, half advertisement and nothing else. What is it? What it is?
Oh, okay. Well, to the right of the word advertisement, then if you see the word advertisement, you should see the text here to the right of it, right? It applies to
Yeah,
new.
advertisement is cut off halfway. I can
Yeah.
screenshot.
Same
Ah.
here. Anyways,
Yeah, it's a matter of expanding the zoom window to be able to see the full thing. You could maybe even drag the zoom window up a little bit and then grab the corner of it and pull it out a little bit. If you don't hit the button in the right to expand the size of the zoom window. The top right, you should have a button there.
it's okay. We can move on. It's fine.
Okay. I just want to make sure everybody's got it. Continuing on the next page of 346, the Real Estate Sales Full Disclosure Act. I'm also snapping new pictures to update them with the latest one too, because it's slightly different. But the same sentences are being highlighted. It's just they made them a little bit wordier paragraphs, that's all. But you're still highlighting just the same stuff. Everything else is exactly the same. All right, and then Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. Oh, do we have this? Yeah, we discussed all that. And then here, Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. These rules are intended to protect the public from unscrupulous developers and marketers, from undue sales pressure that could be associated with timeshare sales, as an example. Buyers have 7 calendar days to back out of the contract. Advertisements for new construction for out-of-state properties marketed in New Jersey in large state subdivisions with 100 lots or more. We already went over this. We're just doing the highlights down here. Let me minimize this so that we have everything fitting on screen here a little bit better for you then. There we go. Open this up and make it bigger. I'm going to get that.
Think we're all good.
Everybody's good? Yes, so.
Yes.
So then we have the Uniform Construction Code, different UCC than the Uniform Commercial Code of the previous chapter 17. In this chapter, we talk about construction. So the state's minimum standard for construction, the UCC, the building codes. Let's write the notes there. The state's minimum standard for construction, building, that's the UCC. And then put this down here. This is good to know. This is actually some useful information. I found it useful before in the past. That existing buildings don't need to conform unless they're found unsafe. When repairs cost more than half the value of an existing building, the entire building must be brought up to code. Otherwise, you only need the new alterations to the building to be brought up to code, not the entire building. Sometimes that's a question asked by people. Everybody good?
Yep, we're
Yes.
good.
Yes.
All right. Ooh, that's a little blurry. Let me just see if I got a screenshot that's not blurry for that. I know I got a replacement one. It's under, what's that, construction permits? Warranty and builder's registration. Okay. No, that's totally different than what I got. Okay. All right, so you're going to highlight this at the top of the page. Warranty and Builders Registration Act. So all new construction in the state of New Jersey must come with a 10-year builder's warranty. The builder buys that warranty through the DCA, the Department of Community Affairs in Trenton. That 10-year warranty is for varying periods for different things. Like the 10-year warranty is for the structure of the house, but like the HVAC system may only be covered for like the first 3 years. So you got different things that may be covered for 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, all the way up to 10 years. You'll have varying things being covered under that home warranty. So all new construction is required to come with this warranty, and it is transferable with the ownership of the real estate. So enforcement, if there's no local building code enforcement inspectors in your municipality, the state's going to conduct their own inspections and code enforcement activities. And those inspectors would be from the DCA in Trenton, unless they share services with another local municipality. So construction permits have to be issued before any construction, alteration, demolition, or change of use or occupancy of a building can be undertaken. So basically, anytime that we sell a house, you need to have that construction a CO, not a construction permit, but a CO, a certificate of occupancy, or CCO, depending on the municipality, what they call it. So how do construction permits work? Well, the UCC, the Uniform Construction Code, requires a construction permit before any construction, alteration, demolition, or change of use of a building that can be undertaken. Applicants must provide information like the location of the property, construction plans, the estimated cost of the work, the names and addresses of the owners, and the designated contractors that will be doing the work. Local construction officials then must inspect the application and the property to determine whether it conforms with the requirements of the code. Then within 20 days, they have to either approve the plans and issue a permit or reject it in writing with the cause of the rejection. If rejected, the applicants may revise the plans to meet the requirements or appeal their rejections to the Construction Board of Appeals. Once issued, the construction permit may be revoked if it contains any false or misleading information or omissions, or if the construction is not started within 12 months of the permit issue date, or if the work is suspended for 3 months or longer after the work has begun. That's how it works. So, page 347, under enforcement. Those are the building codes. And that UCC, the Uniform Construction Code, requires a construction permit. A certificate of occupancy, no new or altered building in New Jersey can be used or occupied until a certificate of occupancy has been issued. That's page 347. On page 348, on request of an owner, a construction official may conduct an inspection of any existing building and issue a certificate of continuing occupancy. This certificate evidences that a general inspection of the visible structure has not revealed any apparent code violations. So basically, any time that you didn't do any work to a house, but you're just changing ownership, you could get a certificate of continuing occupancy. So you're going to need one of these building permits. Some cities, they just call them all a CO. Some have different names for them. A CO, COC, CCO. What's the differences? Well, it depends on what your municipality calls it. So certificate of occupancy is when any new construction is done before that building can be inhabited, they may need to make sure that there's everything is done up to the building code, and there's no conditions that cause a threat to the health or safety of possible occupants. Some municipalities have different names for these inspections. Some just call them all CO, certificate of occupancy. It depends on the municipality. So they could also have a COC, certificate of compliance. That's for work done on existing structures that are not new construction. You could just have the new construction, the new work inspected. Or if it's simply a transfer of ownership and there's no new work, a continued certificate of occupancy. Either way, you're going to need some sort of an inspection. So Smoke detectors are required on each level of a building and within 10 feet of any sleeping quarters. Carbon monoxide detectors with 10-year sealed non-replaceable batteries have been required since 2019 law was updated. You can't have carbon monoxide detectors that have replaceable batteries. They can only have those 10-year sealed batteries. Homes built after 1978 require hardwired detectors. Most municipalities require one on each level with battery backups in case the power goes out. They want to make sure that those detectors will still work. Your local fire inspector official usually does require that battery backup one. They feel more comfortable with it. Even if you're paying for the alarm services, you know, through one of those alarm services that monitor them. Well, if the power goes out, it's not going to help you much. Fire extinguishers must be mounted in kitchens within 10 feet of them with the hardware that they came with. So either in the kitchen or within 10 feet of a kitchen with the hardware that came with it. You can't just stick it on top of the fridge or in a cabinet. They must be rated to put out ABC type fires and must be under 10 pounds. So let's do this highlight on page 348 under safety requirements, and then right there, type ABC under 10 pounds. And for that carbon monoxide detector, write 10-year sealed battery under that. And let me know when you got that.
Got it.
Everybody got it?
Yep.
Yes.
So the New Jersey law about fire extinguishers was signed into law by acting Governor Richard Codey in 2005. It's actually a little interesting story there. There was a rash at the time. There was a rash of these news instances in the news where, you know, the parents were cooking in the kitchen and the little children were reaching up and they grabbed like the handles of the pots or whatever. They want to see what mommy's cooking, you know, so they reach up and they grab the pot handles or the pans and they get doused with the hot grease and they catch on fire. What's your immediate reaction when you see fire? Throw water on the fire, right? Oh, the worst thing you could do to a grease fire is do that because then the fire spreads and it inflames. You guys ever see that? A grease fire and somebody throws water on it? So there was a rash of these instances happening at this one time in New Jersey. So the acting governor, he started doing a little tour of schools and stuff with your regular fire prevention. They had to step up that, lets people also know the little kids in school, you know, teach them about safety, you know, when mommy, daddy's cooking and all that. Well, they also had some younger kids. There was one kid, I think he was a fifth grader. He said, why don't you just pass a law that requires fire extinguishers be installed in the kitchens? Boom. Law was created because of a fifth grader's suggestion. No, they're going to be older than 5 years old, but in fifth grade, but, and that's where it came from. Now, some people ask, well, what is ABC type fire? Well, here's a guide for you. Type A is to put out trash, wood, and paper. Type B fires are liquids, gases, and solvents. And C type fires are electrical fires. So you need different kinds of compounds to extinguish these types of fires. So they enacted this law to ensure New Jersey. Okay, now we have the Hotel Motel Multiple Dwelling Health and Safety Law. This was enacted to ensure that residents of New Jersey have a decent standard and safe units of dwelling space. The state's inspection, often referred to as a green card inspection, must be performed at least once every 5 years And it applies to buildings with 3 or more units, not counting the unit the owner lives in. Hotels and motels also require state inspection anytime there's 10 or more units or sleeping facilities for 25 or more people. This inspection has to be done every 3 years, and they're allowed to have unannounced spot inspections. But for homes pertaining to us, who usually sell residential real estate, if you're selling a rental property with 3 or more rental units, be on the lookout. Make sure if you're getting a listing that the owner's up to date on their green card inspection, because any potential buyer is going to be looking for that. Their agent should be, and their inspector should be notifying them that, hey, it's out of date. They need to update that. Because state inspections usually find things wrong. So you want to make sure that they get that inspection done before you buy it. Then you're good for the next 5 years. So let's highlight under multiple dwelling health and safety law. This is the last thing in this chapter. We're highlighting multiple dwellings with 3 or more units are inspected at least once every 5 years, and hotels at least once every 3. And you can write there in the margin, this is the state green card inspection. It's a state inspection. The industry lingo is, we call it the green card. I think we went over this in chapter 12 too, right? But either way, you need to know about the how often do the 3, the buildings with 3 or more rental units have to have that inspection? How often do they need to get that inspection? At least once every 5 years. Let me know when you got those highlights down.
Got it.
Okay. There's one key terms to review for this chapter. Has everybody got this, by the way?
Yes.
All right, so that's the end of that chapter. Let's do the key terms to review. Charges to developers for extra roads, schools, and so forth in order to get their approvals for their construction projects.
Impact fees.
Correct. 7 is A, impact fees. Test of the soil's absorption and drainage capacities.
Percolation test.
The perk test, yeah. 10 is B. A division of property into more than one building lot. What do we call it?
Parcel. Subdivision.
Division. 16 is C, correct. A community with dense zoning and developers plan for the entire land use.
Planned unit development.
Correct. Or PUD for short, the planned unit development. 12 is D. A group setting standards for local subdivisions.
Planning board.
The planning board. Let's see. 13. 13 is E. A halt to development. What do you call it? And they put a stop to all development in an area.
Moratorium.
A moratorium, correct. 9 is F. New Jersey standard for buildings.
UCC, Uniform Construction Code.
Correct. 17 is G. U.S. requirement that some developments be registered with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. What do we call that? United States requirement for developments to be registered with the CFPB. It is the Interstate Land Sales Full Disclosure Act. 8 is H. State regulations for builders of new homes. State regulations.
Warranty and Builders Registration Act.
Correct. 18 is I. I don't like the way they wrote that. State regulations for builders of new homes. It should be more like a state requirement for builders of new homes for them to get that 10-year builder's warranty, right? So 18 is I. Permits the buyer up to 7 calendar days to cancel contracts for the lease or purchase of such lands.
State Sales Full Disclosure Act.
Correct. 15 is J. A law requiring registration of certain developments within New Jersey.
A Planned Real Estate Development Act.
Correct. 11 is K, the Planned Real Estate Development Act. Zoning that allows more living units per acre than usual.
Density zoning.
5 is L, density zoning. A map of a town section or subdivision.
Plat.
It is a plat map. 14 is M. New Jersey state agency that approves and registers some out-of-state properties. It's actually a division within a department within the Real Estate Commission.
The first one, Bureau of.
Yeah, the Bureau of Subdivided Land Sales Control. 1 is N. Local municipalities authorization for building plans.
Construction permit.
3 is O, the construction permit. Engineering reports often required before building permits are issued.
EIS.
Yes, the environmental impact studies. 6 is P. Turning over of property, subdivided streets as an example.
Dedication.
To a municipality. Yep.
Dedication.
4 is Q, dedication. And putting living units closer together to leave more open space.
Clustering.
It is clustering. 2 is R. And that concludes chapter 18.